70,000 subscribers. That's insane. When I started this channel 3 years ago, I had no idea how big of a thing this channel would become, and I still feel like I'm talking to the first 50 subscribers that ever subscribed to this channel. 70,000 people, it doesn't really feel real to me. My brain can't wrap around the idea of how many people that actually is. So I just wanted to say a very heartfelt thank you so much for subscribing to this channel, watching the videos. Every cent that has been raised from this YouTube channel has gone straight towards paying my education, paying my undergraduate degree. So I really appreciate you being here. 70,000 subscribers is wild, and I wanted to celebrate with doing a little occult and witchcraft Q&A. It's been a while since we did this. I think the last one we did was at 50,000 subscribers, but this is something I've done from the beginning. I've done a Q&A at 1,000 subscribers, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, and then I did the last one at 50K. And now here we are at 70. Wow, that's insane. So I've got some questions here that I really want to answer with you. This is going to be very minimal editing. I'm not going to be doing a whole thing as far as editing is concerned. So feel free to just put me on in the background, podcast style, if you've got some chores that you want to do or whatever. You're cleaning your house and you want to listen in, or if you're commuting to work or something. There's not really going to be too much visually up on the screen. I'm just going to be answering some questions. There's actually some really good questions in here. I put a post up on the community page of my YouTube channel and then also on Instagram. So I'm going to be referring to both of those posts because there are a handful of questions under each post. And I'm just going to go today until my internal battery dies. So I don't know if I'll be able to get to all the questions, but I will definitely try to get through as many as I can. So thank you again so much for being here, and let's get into it. Two quick announcements. The first one is that Astra, also known as Astrological, she is a ceremonial magician. She's a host on the Test Tubes and Cauldrons podcast. I've also had her on this channel many times in various spellwork panels and collaborations and such. She is hosting an Agrippa Club under my YouTube channel membership. So with my channel membership, I usually have a book club. We read books either every month or every other month, usually every month. But what we decided to do for May through August of 2025, we are going to be working through the entire 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa. There's multiple translations available, so if you are interested in joining the book club, I'll have the link for all of that stuff in the description box. Don't buy your translation yet. The Donald Tyson one is the one that Astra is going to be using, but you could also, if you have the Eric Purdue translation, that is just fine. The problem with the Eric Purdue translation is that it's a lot more expensive because it's a lot newer, and I assume most people are not going to be able to afford that. So before you buy your book, drop into the Discord and you can ask Astra all of those questions. But this is a massive feat. I cannot believe Astra is willing to take this on. So we are in my book club going to be reading other books for June, July, and August. But for May, it's just going to be the Agrippa Club to get everyone started. That way people kind of settle into a groove a little bit reading these 3 books, because it's a massive undertaking, not just to host for Astra, but also for the serious occultist that really wants to dive into these works. This is probably one of the greatest, most foundational occult works that we have today that I have recommended on this channel many, many times. And I think it's important for every serious occultist that's really wanting to dive in to read these 3 books. So if you want to join book club, again, all that stuff will be in the description box. The second announcement is that most of you know by now I'm hosting a trip to Peru. It is next April 2026, but spots are filling up fast. Quick update on that. There are only 8 spots left for the trip. So if that is something that you're thinking about joining, we're going to see Machu Picchu. It's going to be centered on Andean mysticism. It's going to be an incredible, epic adventure, seeing a new world wonder and a place I've wanted to go to for a very long time. So I'll have that also linked in the description box. I made a video about it, answering a bunch of questions like payment plans, what the hotels look like, all that stuff. So I'll link the video and then also the trip link to sign up if you're interested. But just an update, at the time of filming this, we are down to only 8 spots left on that trip. Okay, we're done with all the promoty stuff. I hate having to sit here and be like, update number 1, update number 2. I hate that. I really do. But if I don't do it, I've had so many people message me over the years of like, oh, I wish I had known that, or I didn't see the update for that. even if I've posted about it like 50,000 times on my YouTube page and on my Instagram. So I always try to mention it in videos as well, just in case people don't follow me on Instagram or they miss the community post or something, and then they can at least still hear it in a YouTube video, because there have been so many times when people have been like, oh, I wish I had known that this was happening. Well, you can't say that I didn't tell you now. So those are all the weird little promoty things. But back to questions. Let's talk Q&A. First question is actually kind of a spicy one because I have a spicy opinion about it. So we're just diving into the deep end. The question is, I have been asked to do some shadow work, and upon research, there is a lot of Carl Jung advice popping up. It seems very deep and I feel only can be done through a real psychologist. Is there a different type of shadow work for the magical world that I can easily do myself? If so, please, can you explain what it is and how to do it? Thanks in advance. I need to go on a whole rant, and the reason why I need to go on a whole rant about shadow work is because as someone who has formal training in psychology, I do not have a master's in psychology, but I am working on my undergraduate degree, and I'm also just a personal lover of Carl Jung. I love the work that he did during his time for the psychological community. The concept of shadow work has been so misconstrued in the witchcraft community, and if you go on Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, and you see a post about shadow work, it'll often be A, not real shadow work, and B, there will be tons of people in the comments telling you to do your shadow work, that every witch should do shadow work. And shadow work has now been completely taken away from what it originally was and has been broadened and is used as an umbrella term to describe a wide variety of healing modalities, and it is an umbrella term that is used for really just healing oneself and looking at the darker aspects of your psyche. And that's not necessarily what shadow work was originally meant to be. So let me just backtrack. Let me take a step back and kind of talk about what shadow work really actually is, and then we'll talk about whether it's necessary for the witch, what alternatives there are, and so on and so forth. So the term shadow work was coined by Carl Jung. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, and he made massive strides, not just for the psychological community, but also for the occult community, because he very much dabbled into the occult. And that's actually a point of tension between him and Freud. He had a relationship with Freud, and then that sort of dissolved because of his dealings with the occult and the supernatural and getting a little bit too woo-woo. So I really do love Carl Jung and his teachings. I definitely recommend anybody reading his books. They are quite dense, but shadow work is meant to look at the repressed parts of your psyche and bring them in union and integration with your conscious self. So you're taking your shadow self, which is all of these repressed things in your subconscious mind, and you are becoming one with the conscious mind. So you're not necessarily getting rid of your shadow, it's all about integration. And this is a very, very specific form of therapy. So there's many different types of therapy, right? There's traditional talk therapy, which is when you go and sit down with a psychologist, you talk about your childhood, and you literally talk things out. There's things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a completely different approach. It is more goal-oriented, and it actually has goals for you to achieve throughout the whole process. There's internal family systems, there's DBT, there's all these different types of therapy, right? And shadow work is just one of those. Shadow work is just one type of therapy that is very specific to Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist. But what I think has happened is because Carl Jung also happened to dabble in the occult, into the supernatural woo-woo, a lot of occultists, a lot of really witchy woo-woo people picked up his stuff because it's very interesting, and it got integrated not only in the psychology community, but in the occult community as well. But then it got misconstrued along the way because, again, many people are using the term shadow work to really encompass any sort of healing, and that's not necessarily true shadow work because, again, the goal of shadow work is looking at these repressed aspects of your psyche and integrating them with your conscious. I don't think shadow work is for everybody. If somebody wants to do shadow work, great, that's fantastic. But if I were to sit down with a client and try to figure out what therapy works best for them, of course I'm not going to recommend shadow work for everybody because everyone's mind works differently. Some people are going to resonate better with talk therapy. Some people are going to resonate better with DBT or CBT or IFS. Again, there's so many different types of therapy out there, and shadow work is just one. So no, I have a very strong opinion that not all witches need to do shadow work. If someone wants to go down that route, fantastic. I've got some books that I'll recommend momentarily, but working to heal yourself and working on other healing modalities that may resonate with you more than very specific Carl Jung shadow work might be the better way to go for you, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to recommend some books that are very specific to Carl Jung's shadow work, and then I'm also going to recommend some books that are shadow work adjacent, but that you'll probably like a lot more, because I find that when people actually get into Carl Jung shadow work, it's not what they're looking for and they don't like it. It's totally different than what they thought it was. So I'm gonna give you some book recommendations that I think would actually be a lot more helpful. Before I do that, I do wanna say that Kelly Ann Maddox, I love her. I've had her on this channel. I've followed her for a really long time. She has written books. She's got a great YouTube channel. If I were you, I would go subscribe to her channel because she puts out such wonderful content that is very shadow work heavy, shadow work adjacent. She's just really, really great on working with the psyche and self-love and self-improvement. She's got a lot of reflective videos to watch, so I would subscribe to Kellyanne Maddox. She is a fantastic resource online for free. And before book recommendations, going back to the original question, it seems very deep and I feel like it can only be done with a real psychologist. As with any therapy, I think it's best done with a psychologist. Sure, you can walk yourself through certain things, but there is no replacement for having an actual professional lead you through something like that. So you might want to look for a Jungian psychologist who specializes in shadow work that can help you through that. But that doesn't mean that you can't do shadow work adjacent activities. It's probably not going to be like OG shadow work from Carl Jung, but it's adjacent in the sense that it does look at your shadow self. It does help with integration. It can help you be a better person. It can help you connect to your magic a lot deeper. And it really just requires a lot of reading and journaling, honestly, a lot of reading and journaling. And it's so individualized too to the person. And I can't really sit here and say, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, because it would require sessions of getting to know you and getting to know what your personal shadows need. And not everyone wants to sit down and journal on shadow work prompts, you know? Some people are gonna vibe with that and some people don't. I think one of the biggest things that does come up in shadow work circles though is recognizing your patterns. It's probably the number one thing, is to recognize your patterns and then really dissect and trace them back. Where do those patterns come from? And that can kind of help you uncover your shadows, so to speak. But let's talk books. I do have a list of books that I would recommend for this. Let me just move over here so I can put some book covers up on the screen. So for Carl Jung specific shadow work, I would recommend, of course, reading Carl Jung himself. Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious is probably going to be the best introduction for this. Just a forewarning, reading Carl Jung is so dense. It's probably not what you're looking for at all. But if you want to go on hard mode and you want to go straight to Carl Jung, that's the one that I would recommend. Also, Romancing the Shadow by Connie Zweig. This is a lot more of an approachable book on true shadow work that derives from Carl Jung. Also, Meeting the Shadow. So this has many different authors and it's basically like a collection of essays. So I really like this book, Meeting the Shadows, because it's one of those books that you can put on your nightstand and just read an essay before you go to bed at night and kind of read it slowly over a longer period of time. So I would maybe start with Romancing the Shadow by Connie Zweig first, and then maybe work your way back to Carl Jung so it's easily digestible. You have a better idea of what you're getting into. And then Meeting the Shadow is just a really nice supplemental book to have because of its format, with it being a collection of essays. But again, these books probably aren't going to be what you're looking for because the term shadow work is so misconstrued in the witchcraft community. So here are some additional books that I would recommend that I think are better suited for what it is that you're actually looking for. So I would start with Alice Miller. Any books by Alice Miller, specifically The Drama of the Gifted Child. Be prepared though, it's gonna make you cry. It's a really, you have to be in a good mental space. Well, I don't even know if I would say that, to be honest, because shadow work is a process of not only introspection, but facing the things that you don't want to face. It's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. So just know that going into it. Make sure you have some good self-care practices afterwards. Take a ritual bath, eat a piece of chocolate or eat some good food, go out with friends, be social, you know, do all these things that kind of fill your cup as you're going through this process, because it is going to be an emotional toll. So Alice Miller, she left a huge mark on the psychology community, and a lot of psychologists still recommend her books to this day. I love her. Everything that she's ever written, especially starting with the drama of The Gifted Child, it's going to get you in the right direction, I think. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I think that's how you pronounce the name. But this book was so interesting because it really talks about how your physical body stores a lot of things that you don't realize it's storing. Your emotions, your unconscious, subconscious motives. I think that this is a book that everyone needs to read at some point in their life. It really does help connect the mind and the body together. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. This really goes into ancestral trauma. So It Didn't Start With You really talks about how to heal those wounds that go so much further back than just you, which is often the case. It's often passed down by fathers, mothers, grandparents, and everything that they went through. The last one that I would recommend is always a little bit of a surprise to people. It's Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anodea Judith. This is actually a book about chakras, and I know that chakras kind of fall under this maybe more new age umbrella, unfortunately, because I've said this 1,000 times on this channel. When chakras migrated from the east to the west, a lot of cultural context was lost. But I think that Anodea does a really great job bringing in those Eastern traditions and talking about them and discussing them in a really wonderful way, while also incorporating knowledge from the West to really create this holistic system that helps you address various points of your physical, mental, and emotional self. And there's even a whole self-assessment in this book as well. So even though this book isn't necessarily about shadow work, it absolutely has you address your childhood. It has you go through, again, the whole self-assessment section is awesome because you can see which areas of your life or yourself, your energy being, is deficient and where it may be excessive. So those are the books that I would recommend that, again, are a little bit not real shadow work, but shadow work adjacent and probably more what you're looking for. So hope that answers your question. The Bindweed Witch asks, do you feel comfortable talking about the time you worked with Medusa? If so, what was it like, and do you have any tips for working with her? I know you mentioned her a couple times ago, but you never really talked in depth about her. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I didn't really talk about Medusa too much on this channel is because by the time I started this YouTube channel, my time with Medusa was sort of ending. It hadn't ended yet, but it was sort of on the outskirts. I wasn't working with her as aggressively as I was before starting this YouTube channel. So that's mainly why. I definitely don't mind talking about it. I think my time with Medusa was very transformational. I was going through an era where I was a people pleaser. Any goddesses that have to do with the dark feminine, I love that energy because it's like a punch to the face, but in the best way possible. I feel like it's similar to, you know, Hecate or Lilith, all of these goddesses. I don't know, they just have this similar energy to them. But yeah, working with Medusa was very transformational. I know a lot of people that, trigger warning here, just skip ahead a couple seconds, SA. A lot of people that work with Medusa really find solace in her because if someone is a victim of SA, Medusa has sort of become a symbol for that and a place of healing. That wasn't necessarily why I personally worked with Medusa, but I do know of some other people that had incredible experiences with her working through just processing that trauma. There's so many different depictions of her story. It's really interesting to get into her lore, but again, that's not the reason why I had worked with her. I was working with her more to tap into the dark feminine, the dark divine feminine, however we want to say that. Tips for working with her, she definitely has sea and ocean elements. So I've always found that things like hagstones were really great offerings to her. Any sort of seashells. I even used shark's teeth at one point. Just that aggressive energy mixed with watery emotion. But my advice is to really just meditate with her. So what I did initially to connect with her was to sit down and sort of go on this journey. It does require visualization, so if that's not your thing, you might not vibe with this, but I went on a journey inside my mind and I traveled to a place where she would be. So if you look into the lore, you know, the mythology or whatever on any god or goddess, you'll learn where they come from, right? And so in meditating and visualizing that place and traveling to that place, you might have a better opportunity to connect with them initially. So that's what I did at first. And sometimes it requires multiple attempts. I did the same thing when I started working with Thoth. I traveled to Egypt Egypt in my mind, and I know meditation and trance isn't for everybody, but I think it's so essential for talking to really any spirits, not just gods and goddesses, but any spirits at all. I think meditation and being able to go into a trance and speak with those entities there is really helpful. So do some Medusa meditations, travel to the land where she derives from, and see if you're able to meet her there. See if she appears to you or gives you any messages. So this one's a two-part question. First question is, how do you feel about using a D&D NPC that you develop a bond with as a base to create a servitor? How I feel about that is hell yeah, do it. That sounds awesome. But the second part of that question is, will you still go through with it if you think it might really help you, but will probably turn into a tulpa? So the difference between tulpa and servitor is not that you asked for this, but for everybody else, tulpas have a lot more autonomy and self-sufficiency. There's actually a split or a fracture in the psyche that happens where the tulpa is able to have full autonomy, and they're actually even able to front in some instances and really kind of take over the body in possessions. And that may sound like a scary thing, but it's really not. I've got a whole video on tulpamancy if you want to check it out. Servitors, on the other hand, are a lot more simple creations. I like to think of servitors more like cute little mindless robots. They don't necessarily have emotions. They don't necessarily have their own autonomy. But I've also had my own experiences working with these entities where the lines do kind of get blurred between servitor and tulpa. I've had an entity myself that I've talked about many times that started out as a servitor, but then over time that kind of morphed and took on tulpa characteristics, but didn't become a full tulpa. And it was really hard to explain. So I think it's a personal preference. You know, I think tulpamancy is fantastic for the right person, though. It's not for everyone. Servitors, simple creations, fantastic. I think any magician can work with servitors and it's a wonderful experience. Tulpas do get into that territory where, yes, it can be a fantastic, wonderful, fulfilling experience, but only for the right person. I would not recommend it to everybody simply because the process can be so intense and the experiences can be so intense. So that is completely up to you. I mean, are you open to having an entity that is a little bit more like a tulpa? Because if you're not, then I don't think I would take that risk. Tulpas are a massive responsibility. It's almost like getting a pet, you know? You have to think about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have this whole other thing that I need to then feed every day. I need to give it attention every day. It's going to have its own autonomy. So if it wants to run around and destroy things in my house like a puppy might do, that's a possibility. Whereas servitors are a lot more easy to maintain and control. So that is entirely up to you. I can't say either way. But the only thing I'll say is that tulpamancy is definitely not for everyone. Yes, I am wearing the same exact earrings that I've worn in the last 3 videos now because my coven mate got them for me and they're just badass jawbones, so of course I'm gonna wear them today. Growing up in the 90s, I had no idea the things that I was experiencing dealt with having empathic abilities. I learned to ignore it and told myself it wasn't real. With information becoming more available, I realized what being empathic was, and all of a sudden, my whole life made more sense. Thanks to some of your videos, I started learning how to manipulate energy and not to let energy manipulate me. Good, I'm so glad. That makes me so happy to hear. But I've noticed my youngest son is experiencing the same things I did as a child and is very sensitive to energy. For instance, he won't want to hug a family member who's having a bad day because he says it takes away my loveys. I was wondering if you've come across in your studies experiences or know resources on how to help children who are empathic. I don't want him to grow up like I did and want to help him understand what is going on and how to protect himself. I think that's so beautiful that you're wanting to actually create a childhood that is conducive to him as a person and not just subjecting him to having to figure it out on his own. So props to you for being just a fantastic parent, it sounds like, and wanting to support him in the best way possible. I do have a couple suggestions, although please keep in mind I don't have kids yet, so there's always that element to it. I always feel weird giving parents advice because who am I when I'm not a parent yet? But I think the first thing that comes to mind for me that I wrote down is to help teach your child emotional boundaries. And this can be done in so many different ways. This can be in the form of, if he doesn't want to hug that family member, then it's okay not to hug that family member. Also, Kid brains are so magical because I don't know if you remember being a child when you can make up these elaborate fantasies, and I don't know, for me, I was always a hyper visualizer, so I could make believe so easily and conjure things, and I think a lot of kids can do that. Of course, not every kid is like that. Of course, some people can't even visualize at all, and that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here, but child brains are so magical. They're not necessarily constrained by the limitations of society yet, so I would teach him how to visualize at a very young age. Teach him how to build up an energetic shield. Have him think of some grand armor, a big shield that he can decorate however he likes to decorate it. And whenever you go out and about, let's say you're at a farmer's market, you're at the grocery store, wherever you are, actually pull him aside before you go in and ask him to put up his mental shield. So teach him mental shielding practices at a very young age and make it really fun and whimsical. And if he's into dragons, you know, he can decorate his mental shield with dragons or something. But that mental shield is really helpful when going into social settings where other family members are going to be there. You're at the grocery store, there's a million people around you. He needs to have something set up to where he feels protected and safe. And you can do that with visualization. It feels like this magical make-believe. I also think relating to him and kind of sharing your story as well. Again, I don't know how old he is, if he's ready to process something like that, but sharing your story of kind of what you went through and things that really help you, just normalizing it so he doesn't feel strange. He doesn't feel alone. He's not questioning, why am I like this when other people aren't like this? So I think it can be really helpful to just relate to him. One of my favorite ways to get rid of excess energy that isn't mine is a little shake off. So you could make it something really fun every time you get back home to the house. At the front door, you can have him practice shaking off the energy, shaking it off from everywhere that you just went. If you were surrounded by a bunch of people and maybe he picked up some stuff along the way, maybe you both stand at your front door and do a little shake off where you kind of wiggle around and you shake your hands and feet and make it a fun thing, and you're visualizing shaking off all of this excess stuff that doesn't necessarily belong to you or him. Or, you know, maybe you decide to make him a little amulet. I think amulets are great for protecting your physical, mental, spiritual well-being, and maybe you bring him in on that process of creating the amulet. So maybe you help him pick a stone that correlates to protection from psychic energy, from emotions, you know, whatever it is that you're wanting to really specifically tackle with this amulet, but have him pick out a crystal that he's really, really drawn to, and then do a little ceremony with him, do a little anointing, consecrating ceremony with him that's really fun and something that he can wear on him or bring with him or maybe hold in his pocket or something when you're in situations where you feel like he's going to be siphoning everyone's emotions. Again, I'm not a parent, so I don't really know what that's like yet myself. I suspect I'll probably be in a similar position to you though at some point, so I can only sympathize for right now, but props to you for being a good parent and caring enough to create a good environment for him. Just a trigger warning for everyone, this next one is a little bit more political, so if that's something that you can handle listening to right now, definitely skip ahead to the next timestamp. But I did want to read it just for awareness. So this person says, "Hi Ivy, thank you for your wonderful service to all of us." Thank you, that's really sweet. "What I'm going to tell you might seem unimportant, but right now here in my country, there is an uprising to the government and people are peacefully protesting for a week now, but the government is using unbelievably hard force on them and they are arresting anyone who even just says the government should resign. Right now, about 1,500 people got arrested, including students, teachers, the media, people who speak the truth. They are slowing the interest, resigning all the lawyers and judges who oppose them, and firing teachers. So I need all spiritual warriors' help because in a way this affects the whole humanity, all of our rights. Young people who are just walking in the streets are getting beaten up by police force. I know you have a beautiful heart. That is why I asked help from you. They also paid or got an agreement with other countries' medias and nobody knows what is happening here. I need everyone to know what is happening in Turkey and I need any light worker who can help. My apologies if this reply seems unnecessary." Oh my gosh, no, don't apologize. I told this person that I would read their comment on this video to raise awareness for what's going on in Turkey right now. I know there's a lot of stuff going on all over the world. Yeah, I'm just really sorry that everyone over there is going through that. I did light a candle for you, and I hope that by just adding this little snippet into this video, maybe if there's anybody else out there that wants to light a candle for what's going on and maybe send some peaceful, loving energy that way, or maybe just becoming a little bit more educated, donating when possible, I wanted to at least read that comment on this video. So those were all of the questions from Instagram. I'm gonna go over to the YouTube post now, and we'll kind of work our way through some of those questions. When did you know that you were a witch? As in, when did it finally feel right to call yourself a witch? This is such a great question and such a loaded question. I'm just gonna answer organically. I do wanna put a little disclaimer here that if I sat down and thought about my answer, I could probably come up with a way more intellectual answer to this question that spans over a 20-minute YouTube video, because it really is a packed question, but I'm just gonna riff. I'm just gonna speak to what comes to the top of my mind. So as far as me personally, I don't know if that's necessarily gonna be helpful, so I'll talk about me personally and then kind of in a broader sense. For me, knowing when I was a witch or when it felt appropriate to call myself a witch, for me, it just was natural. I mean, from the beginning, as a kid, I was mixing things in the woods. I knew from the get-go that I was always different, that I was weird, and the label witch just fit so seamlessly at the time. And now I don't necessarily, I don't know, I've kind of shed labels as I get older. I adopted labels a lot more easily when I was younger, and now as I get older, I think about who I am, and it just doesn't fit anything at all. So sure, call me a witch, call me a chaot, call me an occultist, call me a spiritualist, call me a whatever, because I've really tried to push myself beyond the confinement of any one particular label. But that's just me personally. So let me go back to, when did you know that you were a witch, as in when did it finally feel right to call yourself a witch? I suspect that you were asking this question because you are in the stage where you don't really know if it feels right to call yourself a witch or not. Are you there yet, or are you not? I think there's a lot of deconstructing that comes with the term witch, beyond just our fantasy versions of what a witch is. But I think we really need to, in 2025, define, what does witch mean to you? Is it someone who casts spells? Is it someone who simply heals people? Is it someone in the kitchen cooking food that heals a person and soothes the soul? Or is it maybe a little bit more medicinal in the sense of herbs? Maybe it's a certain connection to nature. Maybe it's not casting spells at all or doing kitchen witchery. Maybe it's working with spirits. Maybe that's what defines what a witch is to you. There's no clear-cut definition for what a witch actually is. And I find that beginners who are kind of in that stage where they don't really know if they want to call themselves a witch or not, or if that label feels appropriate. First of all, labels are never necessary. I think labels in general do tend to put someone in a box. Not that there's anything wrong with labels, but just deconstructing, what does that term mean for you? Because that term can mean something different to everyone. If you feel like you aren't able to call yourself a witch yet because you don't know how to cast a spell, well, not all witches cast spells. Maybe you aren't tapped into your psychic abilities yet. Maybe you don't know how to work with spirits. Maybe you don't even want to work with spirits. Is that all a witch is to you? I've noticed that some people feel like they have to have so much experience under their belt before they can claim that they're a witch, before they can really apply that label to themselves. And I don't think that's true. I think being a witch is about the relationships that we have with nature, the relationships we have with spirits, the way that we conduct our life. It's not just knowing how to cast a spell. It's not just grinding up herbs and creating a healing potion, although those are all wonderful things. But maybe there's, even some societal deconstruction. You don't want to call yourself a witch because you still have the inklings of what mainstream society says a witch is versus people in the actual witchcraft community. Maybe there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. But I think you'll know. I think you'll know intuitively when it is time to adopt that label, if you ever do. Again, labels can be confining as well, so there's no need to have it all figured out right now with the perfect label. Just go explore, play with your spirituality, and see what happens. I have 3 questions, if that's okay. Yes, that is absolutely okay. Question number 1. What's your favorite replacement for fire when burning something isn't an option, or even when a candle isn't an option? Ooh, I love this. So actually right now in my book club, we are reading a book on elemental magic. So I would suggest looking into the metaphysical associations of fire. Fire is very energizing, it's potent, it's about vitality and passion and energy levels. And so you don't necessarily have to have physical fire to work with the themes of fire. It's very quick, it's very sometimes aggressive. It links you to your passion and to your creativity. And so all of these things can be incorporated into spell work to represent the spirit of fire. Think about more the spirit of fire rather than physical fire in general. Of course, in my opinion, I think it's always best if you can have the actual physical element present, but you can still work with the spirit of an element by maybe doing something quickly, passionately, creatively, even just incorporating heat of any kind. Heat speeds things up. So maybe you bring in a heating pad, you know, like you can get really creative. I'm kind of talking from a chaos magic perspective right now, but you definitely don't have to have physical fire. Think of the other qualities associated with the elements that you want to work with, and then work with the spirit of that. Hello, it is a new day. I got my hair done. It looks a little bit yellow in this lighting, but I'm gonna put a picture up of what my hair actually looked like post blowout at the salon, or after the salon at least. My hair looked so good, but today it's looking a little rough. I think we're like a week into the future since I last filmed. I'm gonna have to film this Q&A in pieces just to, because I just don't have time to like sit down and, you know, do it all at once. So I'm trying to break it up, make it easier on myself. But yeah, it's pulling a little bit yellow right now. It's not this yellow in person. I don't know why the lighting is doing that. That's kind of weird. But sorry, I'm going to talk about my hair for a second. So if you want to skip to the next timestamp, you're totally welcome to do that. But let me go on a little rant because I naturally have really frizzy, giant curly hair. Like if I let my hair air dry, it just shrinks up and turns into like this giant lion's mane. So what I tried to do today, I tried to calm down my curls and just like curl them with a big curler over the top of my smaller, tighter curls, and now it just looks horrible. So it just like, my hair is looking really bad today because I don't want to deal with it. I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just show up on camera with my air dried hair so you can see the texture of it or whatever. But yeah, so my hair is looking a little rough today. Natural curls are hard because unless you're willing to sit down, and I do have a full curly hair routine. I've got that down perfect. I know how to manage my curls. It's just a lot of effort and I just don't want to do that today. So what I did instead of my curly hair routine, I was like, you know, let me try to use the curling iron and sort of like curl / flatten out. It didn't work. I never do that again. That was really dumb. So my hair is looking rough, but it did look cute when it was first done, and I love how it turned out. I'm on a journey back to going blonde, and it's probably gonna take a couple sessions for me to get back to blonde after dyeing it a super dark brown. So anyways, it's a new day. We're going back into these questions. How do you balance out your belief in your work despite huge things like the religion of Christian Science having a history of failure with faith healing? My friend and I both come from a manifestation background, and we feel like witchcraft is different compared to faith work and manifestation due to faith not being necessary in witchcraft. But we still have trouble feeling like we're just delusional and feeling weird how witchcraft just doesn't seem to work for so many people. This is a loaded question. Oh my God, there's so many different angles that I could talk about this question. Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind for me is I want to talk about models of magic, because for me as a chaos magic practitioner, belief is imperative. Your belief in something then makes it real in the reality that you experience. And being able to throw your belief into a new paradigm can result in manifesting different realities and experiencing paradigm shifts and so on and so forth. So from a chaos magic perspective, belief is imperative. Your belief is everything. But there are other models of magic that don't believe that. So let's think about witchcraft. You've got the psychological model of magic, which says that it's more of a psychological process, that external beings can be a manifestation or a projection of your psyche. You've got the spirit model, where spirits objectively exist regardless of your belief in those spirits. And so when you're working with these spirits, it doesn't matter if you believe that an angel exists or not, or that you're working with your ancestor or a god or a goddess or whatever kind of spirit it is. doesn't matter from the spirit model because they exist independently of your belief in them, and there is still power in that. And then you have things like the energy model of magic, the meta model of magic, and there's like a bunch of other new models of magic out there now. So there's many different perspectives. Some people do believe that it's your belief that's important for manifestation and spell work. Other people don't. Especially in the ceremonial magic community, you'll often see people subscribing to the spirit-based model, where these spirits exist objectively, regardless of your belief. So I would suggest, if you are not already familiar with the various models of magic, I would just do a quick little search, models of magic. You can find lots and lots of blog posts, and pretty much any Witchcraft 101 book should cover all the different models of magic, and see if any of those resonate with you, and it might help you kind of sort out some of these questions that you're having about belief itself and feeling weird and delusional and not really being able to throw yourself into this fully. So definitely research that is my number one thing I wanted to say. But also, witchcraft is not synonymous with faith healing. I know there can be Christian witches out there and that very much works for them, but there may be other witches out there that work completely different than a faith-based system. I truly think that witchcraft takes a lot more of an active role. For example, let's talk about prayer versus spells. And this gets into a really, really controversial debate. And I'm not trying to start nothing, okay? With prayer, you have an intention, right? And you are asking, you are requesting that this God or angels or whomever it is that you're praying to fulfill this request. They can refuse that request if they want to. There is no guarantee that your prayer is going to be answered. With witchcraft practices, yes, that can be part of witchcraft. When you're praying to a god, a goddess, some other spirit that you're working with, maybe you try to create a pact with them or something of that nature. But when we're talking about low magic and spell work of sitting down and doing a candle spell, or sitting down to do some divination to come with an actual ritual to manifest, if we're going to use that word manifest, though not all witches will use that word, whatever it is that you desire, there's a lot more of an active component, in my opinion, to a witchcraft practice, because you're not just praying, hoping that that prayer becomes fulfilled. You are taking an active role of, let's say, anointing the candle with your intention, pushing your own energy into that candle. Maybe you ask for guidance from ancestors, guides above, etc., but you are taking action towards the thing that you want. You're not waiting for a prayer to be answered. And again, I know that's so debatable. I could even argue with myself right now. I'm just saying, when you say the sentence, we feel like witchcraft is different compared to faith work and manifestation, due to faith not being necessary in witchcraft, I agree with you. Some people would say that faith is very necessary, whereas other people would say that you don't have to believe in what you're doing at all, because if you're working with spirits and you're working from the spirit model or the energy model, those external influences are going to help you manipulate the situation, whether you personally believe that it's going to work or not. As far as feeling like you're delusional or making things up, or is this the placebo response or whatever, that is a question I get from people all the time. I think I made a video about this specific thing. When you are hypercritical over the situation, me too. Been there, done that. I totally get where you're coming from with this. But at the end of the day, if it works, it works, right? I wouldn't question the process too much. I know it's so hard not to question the process and not to feel like you're just placeboing your way through something, but even the placebo effect needs a trigger. You can't just wake up one day and decide, let's say you're trying to combat depression. You can't just wake up today and decide that you're not depressed anymore. I mean, sure, you probably could, but the likeliness of that actually working and you not being depressed anymore after that is probably pretty low. There needs to be a trigger in order for the placebo effect to even have any sort of effect on your life. So if witchcraft is the trigger for the placebo effect, then great, awesome, who cares? But I do think that at some point in your witchcraft journey, you will experience something that feels very unexplainable. And I think that's what's gonna really shift your perspective. Because I think in the beginning, when you're kind of coming from that manifestation background, especially with maybe you have some religious trauma or you're bringing in some of those religious influences into this, it's hard to believe. It's really, really hard to believe in this kind of stuff until you experience those moments of potentially working with a spirit or something is manifested that you didn't even realize was possible. So I would encourage you to have a really open mind, and it's okay to be critical. It is completely okay to question what you're doing. In fact, I think that's really healthy, but be open-minded to where when that thing happens, you're able to be pleasantly surprised by the situation and you're not pushing it away. You're not trying to explain it away with overly rational thought. I mean, of course, yes, we need to have rationality in our practices, but there are things that have happened in my witchcraft career that I can't explain. It's so beyond the placebo effect, the things that I have seen happen. I think you just need to experience that for yourself. So stay open-minded is my biggest advice. I know that's probably very annoying to hear, but your thoughts are very valid here because a lot of people experience the same thing. Did I even answer your question? I don't even know if I answered your question. That probably was not helpful at all, so. Your last question was, what is your stance on inner voice/intuition? Do you agree with the people who refer to intuition as feelings and nothing mystical, or do you agree with those who claim it's something bigger? I was in a course where people tried connecting to their inner voice, but ultimately they were calling it their own conscious mind, their inner voice. Their conscious mind was just confirming what they wanted to hear anyways. It was messy. I think one of the biggest issues that beginners have when they try to tap into their intuition is really being able to decipher what is true intuition, what's a real intuitive message versus just hearing what you want to hear, hearing your own inner voice, whispering all the things that you're looking for. And sometimes, you know, even if you're sitting down to do a tarot reading, sometimes it can be hard doing readings on yourself because you might be sitting there with your tarot cards, interpreting them in a favorable way. I've seen this so many times. You know, this is almost a meme at this point when there's someone sitting down to do a tarot reading about a really bad breakup and they're trying to figure out, oh, should I get my ex back? And then as a joke, they pull like the death card, the hangman, the, you know, whatever, the tower. They're like pulling all of these really, really intense cards. And then they sit at the reading and go, you know what? Yeah, this looks positive. I should definitely call my ex. I should definitely get back together with them because the death card, that seems really positive. No, obviously in that situation, especially if we're throwing in like 3 of swords or something, there may be situations like that where people are looking at these messages and only hearing what they want to hear. That's such a problem, not just in witchcraft, but in all circles of spirituality, where sometimes we look for the signs and symbols that we want to see, not necessarily the signs and symbols that we need to see or that are put right in front of our faces. And so that is the struggle, right? The struggle is tapping into what's an intuitive message, what is actually being said versus only hearing the things that you want to hear. To answer your question more directly, I think I try to avoid defining what intuition is. I know that's probably going to be an annoying answer, but intuition is so different from person to person. I don't think that I can even define what my own intuition means because it's different. My intuition is different depending on the situation, depending on the spirit that I'm working with. But there are some tips to help you decipher what is your inner voice and just hearing what you want to hear versus an actual intuitive message. One of the biggest things for me to be able to tell whether it's intuition or again, something that I just want to hear that my conscious mind or even subconscious mind is producing, true intuition for me feels like it's interrupting your regular pattern of thinking. It almost feels a little surprising. And I don't want to say that true intuition is always surprising because sometimes you know something's coming. There are times where intuitively you know what the answer is and you're not too surprised to hear it, but there is this aspect of it almost interrupting your current train of thought. So this is why I always recommend meditation. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but when I say to get on a regular practice of meditation, this is one of the biggest reasons why. Because when you meditate, you start getting really familiar with your own inner mechanisms, your own narratives. You will receive thoughts floating in during your meditation and you can allow them to just pass on by. But in those moments when you're meditating and you're getting those thoughts floating into your head, after a while, you're going to get pretty used to hearing the same messages over and over, right? You're going to get really, really good at deciphering what is you versus what is something else. So when that something else does come into your mind, it may seem a little bit shocking or it may interrupt your normal thought patterns. So it's important first to get to know what your normal thought patterns even are in the first place. You'd be surprised so many people aren't even in touch with themselves enough to even know that about themselves. So step one is to obviously seriously, set up a regular practice of meditation, and then just to continue doing that and be really consistent with it until you understand your inner mechanisms a lot better. That way, when you do get an intuitive hit, you can tell the difference and it doesn't feel like a regular thought pattern. I also want to talk about the physiological responses that we can sometimes have with intuition, because if we sit quietly and listen to our bodies, they will often tell us what that intuition is. AKA, do you get a sinking in your stomach feeling? Or are you getting butterflies in anticipation? Are you getting goosebumps? Do you feel a shiver? All of these biological responses can really be taken into consideration when figuring out what is intuition versus something you just want to hear yourself. An example of this is if I'm sitting in a meditation, let's say I have a question in my mind and I'm going on an astral journey to meet up with a spirit guide in the astral realm or something, to receive a message from them to help hopefully answer my question. If it is just wishful thinking and it is not necessarily real intuition and more of a conjuration of my mind just producing what I want to hear, I'm probably not going to feel shocked. I'm probably not going to feel interrupted in my thoughts, really. I'm probably not really going to have a physiological response either. I'm probably not going to have goosebumps or shivers or anything like that. But if I'm in a meditation, going on an astral journey to meet a spirit guide there, and I receive an interesting thought that doesn't feel like it came from me, and I'm experiencing full goosebumps or my stomach is churning a little bit, I know that my intuition is picking up on something. This is a whole rabbit hole, because we could really discuss, okay, does intuition actually come from the subconscious mind, or can intuition come from somewhere else, external sources and such? That's a whole debate, because are you downloading an intuitive hit from somewhere else, or are you just tuning into your own subconscious mechanisms and bypassing the conscious mind? Who knows? I don't have the answers for that. But I do hope that that distinction helps a little bit in figuring out what is intuition versus wishful thinking.
Hey everyone, I actually decided to break this Q&A up into 2 parts. I just decided to break it up because the filming and editing process was just taking way too long, and I wanted to get this out a lot sooner to you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this part 1. If you're watching this in the future and part 2 is already out, I will link it in the description box below. But thanks for watching. I will see you in part 2.